it's an amazing time to be alive. So many capabilities that used to be done by people can now be done with computers much more efficiently.
Today, we are excited to have Alon Bochman, CEO and founder of RagMetrics.
I've had about a 30-year career. I co-founded and sold a software company to Thomson Reuters. Then I spent about 20 years in machine learning and AI. At FactSet, I led a pretty large department. I was responsible for about 100 LLM use cases. They were all in finance, so the stakes were really high. We basically create bilateral feedback loop, which means that the LLM judge evaluates the application and the human evaluates the LLM judge. Feedback from the human makes the LLM judge better, which makes the application better. The best way to learn this stuff is to try this stuff, in my opinion. So if you have an idea, just get started. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for the right answer. The right answer is not going to come for a long time because we're all figuring it out. We're all trying things.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of Simple Tech Talk, where we discuss the impact of AI across different businesses and industries. I'm your host, Taran Agarwal, and today we are excited to have Alon Bochman, CEO and founder of RagMetrics. Alon is a seasoned AI leader with extensive experience from top tech companies, including Google, Microsoft, and FactSet, where he previously scaled an AI consulting practice to over 1 billion at Genpact. He's also a successful entrepreneur, having co-founded and exited a software venture that was acquired by Thomson Reuters. Alon, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Taryn. Great to be here.
Uh, could you start by sharing a little bit about your journey in tech and AI and what you're currently focused on at RagMetrics?
Sure. I've had about a 30-year career. I co-founded and sold a software company to Thomson Reuters pretty early on. Was very, very fortunate to be to join a team of partners that were much smarter than me, and they took me along for the ride. And then I spent about 20 years in machine learning and AI. I got my start there with building credit and risk models for American Express. Um, then led product teams at Google and at Microsoft. At Microsoft, I was part of the Azure AI team, and at Google, part of YouTube Ads. After Google, I joined a company called FactSet as head of AI. FactSet is a Fortune 500 company. The ticker is FDS, and they sell capital markets data. They compete with Bloomberg. Um, and at FactSet, I led a pretty large department. I had about 60 developers and 10 product managers, and I was responsible for about 100 LLM use cases. They were all in finance, so the stakes were really high. And nobody was testing anything, Taran. It was driving me up the wall. Crazy. It's like trying to build a bridge, but you can't run a truck through it. You have to just let people walk through and see if they fall or not. And
Correct.
it was very, very stressful. And I tried a lot of different things to get some testing to happen. We tried to build it ourselves. We tried to buy it. I tried the stick. I tried the carrot, and eventually, I reached acceptance. And I actually spoke with I spoke with a couple of friends of mine that are in the space, and I basically asked them like, what's the answer here? Like, how do you
Mhm.
master stuff? And they all kind of shrugged and said, yeah, evals are hard. You just have to muddle through. And that's when I realized that there might be actual opportunity here. There are a lot of vendors out there. They didn't do what we needed. And I realize now that they didn't do what a lot of other people needed too.
Mhm.
So I left FactSet to launch RagMetrics. And that's what we do. We help people test their AI applications and improve the performance and sell based on the tests, all sorts of stuff like that.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that, Johnny Allen. And it's the work that you're doing with RagMetrics is really cool, especially since it's backed up with so much of AI experience, even before when AI was actually cool and mainstream. With RagMetrics, from what I understood, you've introduced bilateral evaluations combining humans and LLM judges, which is a very unique approach. Could you explain a little more on how exactly this improves AI model performance and why you believe this has not been addressed adequately before?
Yeah, so maybe let me start with the status quo before this feature. I think if you want to build an AI application, you sort of have, you have three bad choices right now. Bad choice number one is you don't test anything. And that's actually the choice that 90% of the teams that I speak with take. Of course, they don't call it that, but really, like, they're not testing anything. You basically put the AI out there. You trust OpenAI or Anthropic or DeepSeek to do a good job for you, and your application is as good as the underlying model. And you kind of hope for the best. Um, Choice number two is to get people to test your software. So basically, maybe we'll have some labeled data, and you basically get people to look at the questions, look at the answers. They read what the AI says, usually after the fact, and they'll decide if it's good or bad. And then if it's bad, you will make some adjustments to try to fix it. And that's sort of the way that you would develop traditional software. But it doesn't work so great for AI because you're dealing with language in and language out, and the surface area is so big. You know, a chatbot can say so many things, so many great things, and so many terrible things, and you usually don't have enough people to just look at everything that comes out of this machine. And every time the code changes, it's going to say different things. So you need to reread everything. So it just doesn't scale. And teams that do it this way um, have very low satisfaction. They do it, like they're running, but it's a grind. Bad choice number three is to use a large language model to actually judge the large, the LLM judges the LLM.
Right.
And it's a lot more scalable.
Mm.
And so advanced teams can use it. But the problem is that the LLM judge is also kind of hit or miss. And so you sort of need the LLM judge can hallucinate, just like the your application can hallucinate. And when it hallucinates, it finds problems that aren't there, and it misses problems that are there. So
Mhm.
you still end up needing people to look at the judge, and then there's spreadsheets flying around, and the problem gets big enough, then the dev team gets yelled at, and it's just it's also stressful. So that's sort of three bad choices. And what we do is we basically create a bilateral feedback loop, which means that the LLM judge evaluates the application, and the human evaluates the LLM judge. And feedback from the human makes the LLM judge better, which makes the application better. The feedback from the LLM judge makes the human better, which makes the application better.
Mhm.
What I mean by that is, a human being can only spot so many typos. Like, we get tired. It's the attention, even if we have amazing attention to detail, if we're on the job like 3, 4 hours, we're going to start missing stuff, or at least
Of course.
I should
Yeah.
speak for myself. Um, but the LLM judge is tireless. Once you teach it what a typo is, it's going to spot them every time. And so it can spot a lot more things than people can. On the other hand, it spots a lot of things that are mirages. They're just not true. It's not really a mistake. It's nothing that needs to be fixed. It just looks like a typo. It's not really a typo. So a human being can look at a big list of um, red flags or yellow flags from the LLM, and they'll notice a lot more than they did before. And they can also direct the LLM to chill out about some things and to pay more attention to other things. And this makes both the human and the LLM better. That's what we mean by bilateral feedback.
Mm. Thank you so much for that clear breakdown. I think most people don't realize how limited the current testing options actually are. I love I really like the bilateral approach you're building. It feels like a feedback loop that could actually scale with the complexity of language. But I'm curious, how do you ensure that the human feedback itself is reliable? Like, aren't there risks of introducing bias or inconsistency from the human side too?
100%. Actually, let me give you an example of that
Yes.
from my last role. So, I
Yeah.
was working at FactSet, and FactSet has a formula language in Excel. So, if you're building a financial model and you would like to automate it, you don't want to hard code numbers into it. Maybe your model is a particular stock, and you want to pull in the time series of revenue, quarterly revenue from the stock or something like that. You don't want to copy paste every number. You want a formula that just pulls in the last 5 quarters or the last 10 quarters. So there's an Excel formula to put in the quarterly revenue and also quarterly EPS, also quarterly lease expenses. And there's like 500,000 of these formulas. They're very, very challenging to master. So there's a lot of tech support calls that come in and people are asking like, what's the formula for X? It's very, very common. And FactSet has an amazing tech support team, and they basically pick up on the first ring and they'll answer your question. And it's a major selling point. But it's also very expensive to have experts, people that understand these 500,000 formulas that are answering your question. So they wanted to automate it. So we started to create a tech support agent that would answer these questions. Um, but to your point, like there was a lot of distress about whether the tech support agent would be good enough. What if it gives the wrong formula?
Exactly.
So the way it worked is first the agent would come up with an answer, and then the human would actually either accept it or reject it or write their own. And this way, there was no risk that the big bad AI would send out the wrong information to clients because the human in the loop would sort of catch it. But to your point, what happens if the human is wrong?
Exactly.
And what ended up happening with our first couple of iterations is the accuracy started at 50, right? Like or zero. And then it went up to about 70 or 80%. Then it started to plateau. We were like, why is it plateauing? Why isn't it getting any better? And it turned out that we were taking corrections from the people, from the human agents that were fixing what the LM said. But it turned out that a couple of the humans disagreed with each other and they never spoke with each other. So whenever we would get a question that says, let's say, what is the formula for cash? One human would take that to mean cash and marketable securities, and another human would take that to mean cash in the bank. And those are two slightly different numbers. They're usually the same for most companies. They can be different for some companies if a company has two different types of, assets. And those two people, they were both sure that they were right. They'd never spoken with each other. So they were not aware they had a different view than the person sitting right next to them on the team
Right.
because it never came up. Because before this co-pilot, they were each talking to one customer at a time and they didn't compare notes. And this happened on a grand scale. Like there were a lot of examples of all these disagreements where everybody was sure that they were right, never talked to each other. So this was like an amazing opportunity because now that we have a central system that logs what the humans say, we have at least a chance to spot disagreements between humans that we couldn't spot before. And every disagreement is an opportunity to make the system better. We can decide as a group whether cash means cash in the bank or cash in marketable securities. Once we decide that, we can make the API more consistent, the documentation better, customers happier, and you decide it once, and then you're basically building that knowledge base. But here's the thing: as soon as you install a knowledge system like that, what you're saying is now the source of truth, the ultimate arbiter, is not going to be the human being. It's going to be this knowledge base that we're building. And if
Right.
the human being disagrees with the knowledge base, we assume that the knowledge base is right. And the human being, if they're really, really sure that they know better than the knowledge base, then they should go through the right process to change the knowledge base. So there's also a little bit of give and take there because we're taking the system of record away from whatever the human thinks at the moment to be this like permanent storage. But I think that that's ultimately the way to make these things more reliable.
Mhm. No, that's actually such a fascinating example, and thank you again for breaking it down. Like not just of AI limitations, but of human inconsistency too. Like uh, I love how I love the idea that every disagreement became a chance to improve the system.
Yeah.
But it also makes me wonder, once the knowledge base becomes the ultimate source of truth, how do you keep it from becoming too rigid? Like, how do you make space for edge cases or evolving definitions without locking the system into like a single interpretation forever?
100%. So let's stick with that our example. Let's say, accounting rules change. And it may be that, I don't know, we can't capitalize leases anymore, whereas we could before, or some tax rules change. So when the world changes, the knowledge base has to change with it. Otherwise, it gets stale. So you definitely need a process where people can reach an agreement, they can work through a disagreement, and they can update the knowledge base. They can either update it because two people disagree, and so we decide which one is right, or maybe it's a compromise, and we update the knowledge base with the compromise. Or we can update the knowledge base because the facts change, the world change, and we need to keep
Yeah.
up. So it cannot be a read only knowledge base. It has to be a read write knowledge base. But the point is that we, we, the process to update the knowledge base involves some consensus building. It's not just that, Alan wakes up, had a bad lunch, and can change the knowledge base because he has indigestion. He's mad. So that's not how it works, right? We have to go through some sort of consensus building in order to update the knowledge base, and this adds value to the knowledge base.
Mm. Oh, makes sense. Makes sense. Wow. That's so interesting. Like, I haven't really explored this kind of topic before, but it makes a lot of sense. And like, a read write knowledge base with built-in consensus sounds like a powerful way to evolve with the world while still staying grounded in shared understanding. Uh, but Alan,
This is sort of what we're chasing, like with RagMetrics. The way this bilateral system works is by building up this knowledge base of examples. I think a lot of people try to manage it in Excel sheets today.
yeah.
It's tough because it's tough to keep them version and share it with people and record approvals. And so we're trying to build an enterprise system that will be a little bit less frictiony.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I wonder if there are other companies doing the same thing because I haven't come across one. So it's very interesting.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Now, Alan, switching gears a little bit, since a lot of our listeners are curious about AGI and where it is all headed, could you describe AGI in simple terms? And from your perspective, what would actually count as a real breakthrough on the path to true AGI?
So I have maybe a little bit of a different take on AGI. I think that AI and now AGI are actually defined as whatever computers can't do yet, and we keep redefining it.
Right.
So if you think about where we were before ChatGPT launched what, like 3 years ago. So let's say January of 2021. If we go back to January of 2021, um, and you were to ask people if computers can read and talk to you and not make mistakes anymore and understand what you're saying most of the time, would you consider that AI? I think in January of 2021, most people would say, yeah, that would be AI. That's not going to happen for 50 years. And then we have this magic moment, fastest growing product in history, and suddenly we move the goalposts, and now it's not AI anymore. It's just deep learning. It's just statistics. It's nothing. It's no magic. We know exactly how it works. It's not AI. AI is still 50 years away because there's more, because there are all these flaws, right? It hallucinates. We talked about some of the flaws in this chat. There's many other flaws. It can't count the number of R's in strawberry. There's all these problems. And when we solve all these other problems, then we'll get to AI, or we'll get to AGI. But in my opinion, Taran, what happens is once it counts the number of R's in strawberry correctly, we'll just redraw the goalposts again. So
Right.
it's going to be, we'll never get there because we're people, we have our pride, and we always want to feel special. Computers will never ever reach AGI because AGI will keep getting redefined. However, in any kind of like economic terms, this is an amazing time. Like there's so many capabilities that used to be done by people can now be done with computers much more efficiently, much more cost effectively. Um, it's an amazing time to be alive, and even if we can't agree on the label for it, it's a huge economic boom.
No, I completely agree. I completely agree. And also, it's I love the way you framed it. AI as this moving target we keep redefining. It's kind of funny how every time we achieve something once thought impossible, we just rebranded it as not AI anymore. But that makes me wonder, do you think this constant shifting of the goalposts actually slows down our ability to recognize real progress, or does it push the field to keep evolving faster?
No, I think it's actually pretty good. If you I don't know what kind of household you grew up in, Tehran, but
Mhm.
in my household, like the grades were never good enough, never working hard enough. You can always do more. Like,
Yeah.
like I don't know, you bringing the 98 out of 100 home, and you get a question like, "Why did you get these two things wrong?" That's the kind of house I grew up in. So when you grow up in that kind of house, the goalposts always get redrawn, no matter like whether you're getting a high school degree or a college degree or a PhD. It's never it's
Couldn't agree more.
never good enough, right? And some households are like that. Um, the advantage of growing up in a house like that is you get this like giant chip on your shoulder. It's always pushing you forward, right? So you will achieve more, you will advance faster, you will never rest on your laurels. The disadvantage of growing up like that is you're never satisfied. And so some people are never satisfied with the amount of money they have. There's always more. Some people are never satisfied with the amount of knowledge or accomplishment. And I think that we're sort of trapped in that hamster wheel where the more we accomplish, the bigger our goals are. But that's also, it's not all bad. I mean, it's a little bit sad, but it's a little bit happy because that's how we get to lift people out of poverty. That's how we get to universal income. That's how we get to make this world a better place.
No, 100%. That's a very noble perspective, and I know exactly what you mean. I think a lot of us grew up in those 98 isn't enough households, especially me coming from an Indian household. That was very, very normal amongst me and my other friends. But in a way, that mindset kind of mirrors how we treat AI, never satisfied, always expecting more.
Right.
On that note, since AI keeps improving and taking over more routine tasks, I wanted to ask, how do you think businesses and society should handle the potential job displacement of workers, especially as more of those repetitive jobs become automated down the line?
I think we're going to have to go to some sort of universal income to satisfy it. I mean, I think of honestly, I'm going to just kind of try to answer your question directly. I look at the Industrial Revolution,
Mhm.
look at the French Revolution. So the French Revolution was bloody. The Industrial Revolution was a little bit violent with Floodites, but not really bloody.
Yeah.
And so I think that our best case scenario is going to be more like the Industrial Revolution and less like the French Revolution.
Mhm.
We don't want heads rolling in the gutters. And I think that the biggest difference between those is with the French Revolution, there was just a much, much bigger class gap. The poor were so much poorer, the rich were so much richer, there was so much less mobility, there was so much more desperation. And with the Industrial Revolution in England, it's not like it was exactly um, a paragon of equality. I mean, we're not talking about communism, but
Right.
still, like the government took major steps to make the lives of poor people less bad so that they don't rise up and kill everybody.
Right.
And I think that we are going to have to do that. I think we're going to have to do that not only because I mean, we're going to have to do it because not just for to preserve the society, but also because it's the right thing to do. I think AI can create so much wealth that it is important to share that wealth with a large, large swath of society. Otherwise, if you shut them out, it could be quite, quite dangerous and also wrong.
Mhm. Mhm.
So what's going to happen is I think that there'll be a lot of jobs that people do today, and those jobs are not going to exist. And I think that we will have because those jobs won't exist anymore. It means that whatever those jobs are producing is going to cost a lot less money because it's going to be produced with software instead of with labor. So it's going to be a lot cheaper. So, think about hiring an architect for $10. Think about hiring a lawyer for 10 cents, because a really good one.
Lovely word. Yeah.
Right. So we will still consume like a lot more of these services and we'll pay a lot less for them. But what's going to happen to all the architects and lawyers? Well, I think that some of them will get scale for what they do because each of these systems needs to be fine-tuned, trained, steered by a domain expert. And if a domain expert is dealing with like one case at a time, they learn at a particular speed. But if they're overseeing a system that deals with hundreds or thousands or millions of cases at a time, then they learn at a much greater speed. So we can have these like super domain experts of the kind that we don't have today because no human can be exposed to so many examples yet. So I think for some people, it's going to be extreme scale and extreme value. For other people, they're going to be retrained and, there's going to be just like a lot of jobs are going to go away. I think that there's a chance that a lot of jobs will be created. And then for a third group of people, it's just they won't have to work. Like we'll be able to satisfy our basic needs with a basic income. It doesn't mean that we all get to live on, Fifth Avenue in the penthouse, but it means that none of us are going to be hungry.
Makes sense. That's honestly such a powerful way to frame it, drawing that parallel to the industrial revolution and emphasizing not just the societal need but the moral responsibility. And I love your point about how domain experts might gain leverage through scale rather than being replaced outright. uh, with that in mind, and given your experience leading AI efforts at places like Google, Microsoft, FactSet, you've seen a lot of the industry. What what industry do you think is going to see the most dramatic transformation from AI over the next 5 to 10 years? It can be any industry.
It's so hard to answer. I'm very optimistic. I think just about every industry is going to be transformed. I think of AI like sort of like electricity. So if you think about it, if you're in like the I don't know 1890s and Tesla is pushing alternating current and Edison is pushing direct current, and none of those have achieved scale yet. And you're basically lighting your house with candles. And when you walk out in the streets after 6 p.m., there's there's some streetlights that are powered by candles. You don't really think of electricity as a world changing technology. You're thinking like, okay, maybe the candles would be a little bit cheaper. Like, okay, maybe I'll get a little bit more light in the street because that is the closest direct application that you see from the lab. Like they're building light bulbs. That was the first electrical appliance. So you're thinking, okay, well, it's a nice technology. I'll get some light bulbs. They'll be cheap light bulbs. Great. I'll save on my wax bill for my candles. But that's not really what it is, right? Completely changed the world. It just took like 30 years, 40 years to get there. I think we are at the same point with AI where we're looking at these chatbots and we're thinking, oh, great, AI is going to be a nice chatbot and I'll be able to chat with it and it can make some pictures for me. But that's like the light bulb. It's just the beginning. It's really going to completely, in my opinion, transform a lot of different industries the way electricity did. It's just going to take a few decades to get there.
No, that's a very wholesome perspective. And I love the optimism. And I'm also the same way. And I like to believe that that's how AI is going to take shape. And I've never heard AI compared to electricity like that. I've heard it getting compared to the internet, but it makes total sense. We are probably still in that cheap candle replacement phase without realizing what's coming next. But that level of transformative power, I imagine there are being moments where it also felt a bit unsettling. So during your time working so closely with AI and now generative AI, have you encountered a situation where the capabilities felt genuinely concerning or even dangerous? So
100%. Yeah.
yeah.
Let me tell you this one story. Actually, it happened very recently. So I was at this conference in New York. It was the AI engineer conference. It happened about a month ago, and it was organized in Midtown. There were maybe I don't know 1,500 AI engineers from around the world got together. There were some talks. There were some breakout sessions. During one of the breakout sessions, there was a talk by OpenAI. OpenAI was promoting, describing their new agent framework. It used to be called Swarm. Now it's called OpenAI Agents. They just launched it a couple of weeks ago. And there's one engineer from OpenAI that was describing how you use this thing. And he basically did some live coding for an hour. So there were maybe 20, 30 of us basically watching him code. And he was taking audience requests. Now, the the agent framework is basically it's a way, an agent is basically like a chatbot that's also allowed to call tools. So if you're familiar, I don't know how technical your audience is, but if you're familiar, tools are basically like other programs. And when the agent produces certain strings, those programs get called with some parameters. So it's just a standard way of translating output from an agent into program execution. And OpenAI has created a framework to basically make that standard a little bit easier so you don't have to code your own sort of string parsing and
Correct.
things up.
I think even Google did that recently with Google Agent Space. I think they
That's
released
right.
it. Yeah.
There's actually a few of these, right? So there's Crew AI, there's LangGraph, Google has one, OpenAI has one. This just happened to be the first one that I saw like with live programming. So what this guy did is um in the last like 15 minutes or 10 minutes of the hour session, he basically created an agent that he called it the bootstrap agent. What this agent can do is it can basically create its own tools. Instead of you specifying a list of tools that it can pick from, this agent is empowered to create its own tools. So you basically describe the kind of tool that you want, and the agent finds that tool in the local machine and just uses it.
No
And
way.
yeah, and this whole thing, like it's 25 lines of code. That's it. Super, super simple. And what this code does is basically like, so here's a demo of this code that I found really creepy. In this demo, you write this program. It uses Swarm, OpenAI Swarm, now agents, 25 lines of code, and then you run it. And then the agent says, you say hi to the agent, says hi, and then you ask the agent some kind of math problem, like let's say multiplying two numbers, each number is 4 digits. This is beyond the ability of large language models to do. Even the newest one just cannot get it right. So you ask it that question and it gets it wrong. And then you say, make yourself a little calculator, make yourself a calculator. And it does. It says, okay, I've added a tool. Now the tool is called calculator. Now I can use the calculator. You
Mhm.
give it the same question, the same multiplication, and it gets it right and it's instant. And that was creepy to me because this agent can execute any local code just by thinking it.
Yeah.
And so you can imagine if that agent were left running, it could just accumulate capabilities without any oversight. So it's
That's
truly,
so
truly
cool.
scary. Yeah.
Yeah. That is so scary. Wow. uh I've seen these kinds of things built with N8N and other tools, but like for it to self-learn and then self-identify what tools to choose and eventually learn is just absolutely creepy, I would say, and mind-blowing.
Creepy. And it was a super short program. So this program,
25 lines of code, right? You said?
25 lines of code. I actually posted this program on LinkedIn. We could share it for your users, but
Yeah.
warning, please don't run it at work.
Yeah, like it's crazy that the agent can generate and run its own tools with just 25 lines of code. Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. Well, Mr. Allen, on a lighter note though, now that we're getting towards the end of the conversation, outside of all of the professional use cases we discussed today, do you ever use AI in your personal life? Any tools or apps you found genuinely useful or just fun to play with outside of your work?
100%. I use it quite a bit, and I'm always finding new use case for it. Building a company requires learning a lot of things. Just because there's no one to do it for me, I have to do a lot of things myself, and so learning speed is really important. And I find AI to be a great learning companion. So whether it's using something like OpenAI Deep Research or equivalent products from other platforms are a big accelerator. um, I will often ask it to sort of Gemini has this great feature where it can summarize transcripts from YouTube videos. So
Yeah.
read faster than I can consume video. So I usually I'll read summaries before clicking on a video. It's just a lot faster, and then I can click on the right one. When I need to make a demo for my software, I need some sample data. I don't want to share client data, so I'll just make some sample data and
Mm,
demo scenario and
yeah,
make it
that's a
construct.
very useful. Yeah,
Really,
that's awesome.
really useful in a lot of different ways.
That's awesome. Outside of your professional life, and makes a lot of sense. AI is really the ultimate learning companion, especially when you're wearing multiple hats as a founder. It's like having an always on research assistant, right? I also have my AI, like the previous scenario that you described with the AI agent being able to call different tools, calculators. I created one for myself recently, something like that. Of course, not as advanced as that, but somewhat the same purpose. And it's just made my learning so much more efficient than it ever was. Like, because it's able to go through all of my documents, it's able to go through the internet when I needed to, it's able to go through my Excel sheets. It's just become so much easier to learn. But speaking of building companies, and one last question for you, given your own journey and successful exits, what advice would you give to entrepreneurs today who are trying to leverage AI effectively, SMBs and large enterprises? And are there any common pitfalls you see companies falling into this space?
Sure. So a couple of pieces of advice there. First of all, nobody has the right answers, including me. Like we're all figuring out together. We're all learning together. All of us are super, super early to the game. It's not, if this were baseball, it's not the first inning, it's the first minute. It's just so early. So what does that mean? It means that the best way to learn this stuff is to try this stuff, in my opinion. So if you have an idea, just get started. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for the right answer. The right answer is not going to come for a long time because we're all figuring it out. We're all trying things. At the same time, I noticed that a lot of people are building things. Um, they're trying things and they're not testing these things. And this is great when you're experimenting. But if you want to make something commercial, if you want to make something for other people instead of just for yourself, please test it because you'd rather find out the problems during testing than when customers yell at you. So I think that we're so early that and this technology is so convincing after a few minutes at a glance that people overestimate what it can do and underestimate all of the um, gaps that it has yet, and it has a lot of them. And there is no shortcut to finding these gaps other than to just create a test that has a lot of examples of what you want this thing to do with examples of the correct answer, and you just kind of run through it. So I think testing will really help people sort of graduate from, if you want to graduate from personal hobby, personal learning to value for other people, I think testing is the key for that.
100%. That's such a great note to end on. Just start, don't wait for permission, and test thoroughly before shipping. I love the humility in your approach to Alan, reminding us that even the experts are still figuring this out in real time. I think today's conversation really highlighted just how early we still are in the AI journey. We talked about the challenges of evaluating AI effectively, the importance of building a robust feedback loops, how knowledge bases evolve, and the broader societal shifts AI could drive from job displacement to accessibility and opportunity. Alan, I think your perspective on AGI and even that live coding demo that you shared really brought home how powerful and sometimes unsettling this kind of attack can be. With that said, thank you so much to all of our listeners for joining us on this episode of Simple Tech Talk. And Alan, huge thanks for you. Huge thanks to you for sharing your insights, your stories, and your time. This was definitely a fascinating one.
Awesome. Thank you, Taryn. Take care.
Thank you so much, Alan. Have a great day.